Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Girls Talk Transit. Today we're reviewing the astrology from March 16th through March 22nd, 2025, and we're your host. I'm Maddie,
And I'm Kaleigh.
and welcome back. So, just like last week, we're starting this week on Sunday with another Hellenistic moon void, of course. That begins very early on Sunday morning, right after the moon in Libra squares Mars. It will go void all the way. So, all day Sunday, all day Monday, and then most of the day Tuesday until 8 p.m. on Tuesday. Then the moon will move and be in Scorpio and then be trining Mars. So I'm curious, did you kind of experience last week's Hellenistic moon void course? Did you kind of notice that energy?
I didn't. I feel like it felt busy for me because I felt like, as you had kind of explained it before, like it was like nothing was kind of happening. But then we had just talked about it too, and you were like, well, maybe it's more like it's not a beginning of anything new. Like we could be
Yeah.
wrapping up like old things. Mm, in that way too, maybe I kind of felt it. But yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I felt like I noticed it. And I do want to mention that with Hellenistic moon void courses, it's not like things don't happen. So I was seeing some posts about people oh, gotta get stuff done before it starts, but that's not necessarily like what the moon void course means. When we use astrology for starting things or initiating projects, you do it the moment you start that project, the moment you start that thing. And it is that's when the chart is created, like the very moment that you start it. And so when you finish it or whatever, there's not really necessarily another chart because you're using the inception chart, the birth chart of that thing when it first started. You don't really create more charts throughout your life. You just use your birth chart to create the solar return chart, etc. So it's not really about if you could finish things during void of course moons, like that's a natural thing, but you don't necessarily want to start something during a moon void of course because that birth chart for that thing that you're starting, the moon's not making any aspects, which is generally just not a good thing to have in a birth chart of creating something, you know?
Why do you think that would be? Like, what comes up as like the trouble if the moon doesn't make any aspects?
Just because the moon is the manifester of the chart, right? The moon's the fastest moving planet. So you look to what aspects the moon is making in terms of what truly manifests or becomes real in the chart's kind of work. And so if the moon is not making any aspects for 38 degrees or a big chunk of time, it's like this thing will just kind of float off in the ethers and, just it started, but it never really got finished, or something happened and it got sidetracked. The moon is kind of that grounding element that makes things truly materialize.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I definitely like had a lot of ideas this past week, but definitely didn't take any action on them. So maybe it's a good thing that I didn't. But um, yeah. So I guess like the token of wisdom there could be like just to, know like this isn't like the best of whenever I guess there's a void of course moon, it's not the best time to start new projects.
And maybe a sign to just be finishing what you need to finish too, as we
Yeah.
are wrapping up Pisces season this week. And I mean, we tried to we did try to plan to record this podcast during the Voda moon. It didn't happen.
Yeah. True. Very true.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of things like that. Um, so I don't know, there's many different ways, but I think just really starting something new and fresh, like somebody was talking about they had an interview. Well, if this is the very first interview, maybe that's not ideal, but if you've already been in the interview process, and this is just another interview, that's still your whole process began. The first part of that job application, is really when you began that job, or
Mm-hmm.
that job search. So it's kind of things like that. Like, what is truly the beginning of the thing you're talking about or you're worried about?
Yeah, I
So,
wonder. I wonder too, like if it was a void of course moon, like and something were to begin, you might not feel like emotionally involved in it in some way.
Mm,
Like
that's a
there's
good
that
point.
yeah, there's like an absence of connection. Like I do know in synastry, if like you and your partner's moons like can't see each other in some way, like it makes a lot of difficulty for you understanding each other like on an emotional level and like seeing who like the truth of the other person, like the core essence of them. So it would feel like it would like there would be some kind of similarities with that, like the like connection piece is missing to you and whatever that thing is. Like maybe there was like a spark, you thought it was there, but it wouldn't, like you said, manifest or like carry out.
Right, right. So that's just things to think about when we're talking about these Hellenistic moon Buddha courses. It's not an end all be all, but it's just like, hey, I'm gonna start writing this book this day. Like maybe not ideal for that, but if you've
Mhm.
already began the book, like it's fine to keep working on it, you know, things like that. So
Yeah.
that's a big though, like 3 days, honestly, to start off our week. Um, in between that, on Monday, the 17th of March, the sun will meet the North Node in Pisces and be a bit of a reflection back to the full moon eclipse that
Hmm.
was happened last week. And just a big moment of awareness, I think, around the eclipse energies, and then maybe also a big moment of awareness around like what you're being asked to step into in terms of like solar awareness, what you're being brought to light or being aware of in this moment.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's like shedding some light onto the path ahead because previously we had Neptune sitting with the North Node.
Hmm.
And that was like confusing and not really sure like directionally which way to go. So I think the sun meeting here is like we're getting some clarity of that coming through.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good point.
yeah, and definitely speaking to that eclipse that we had.
Right. It is, I agree with that because, like, whenever the sun was like squaring the nodes, that's often what they would say, like, you're in the bendings of the nodes where you're kind of far away from your path or you're experiencing something that's like disrupting your path. But when the sun is conjuncting the north node, like, that is a big moment of like, this is me, this is it, like, this is what I have to do. Like, it is a big kind of inflation of ego, but maybe in a necessary way for you to take action or be aware of what is going on in your life and like what has to change or shift. The nodes are really places of a lot of energy that often relates to a lot of big changes in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the notes highlight like eclipses that we'll be having like over the course of a year and a half or so. So I think meeting here is like showing us like you said like what are some of those things that we're going to be working on for the next year and a half or what ways do I need to change or alter so I can align more with this like nodal point and like go in that direction and we're often like yeah being shown sometimes like what's holding us back from getting to where we need to go.
Mhm, exactly. So while the moon is still void, maybe during this day is just you are reflecting on last week's eclipse and what now is being shown the light of that. Like, what do you have to step into? What do you have to put more power into? And I think it's just interesting that this is happening. And then, we do have Aries season coming up, but that's when the sun turns to be exalted in Aries. And then it's like a real big empowerment of self, you know?
Yeah,
But
definitely. I think it'll yeah, it's like we get information about like this is where we're supposed to go and then we feel like okay, like here I am ready, you know.
right. Because I mean, Neptune's still in the mix, and like, yes, the sun does conjunct Neptune on Wednesday. It goes exact then. And I feel like the North Node on Neptune was like, oh, I have no control over anything. I can't do anything. I don't have any awareness. I don't understand what's happening. This is all out of my reach. This is all universal. This is all foggy. But then the sun here is like, but here is what I do have. This is what I do own. This is what I do take ownership of. And then that kind of plants that seed for the Aries sun, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Especially like marking that like path of new beginnings too. Like it actually works well that it meets the North Node and then shifts into the sign of Aries because we're able to start new, and go in that new direction.
Right. But yes, in between that, the 19th, the sun is still conjunct Neptune though, and Neptune, still very much involved in all this. So that is a
Yes.
moment, maybe of sweet escapism, maybe a break from the eclipse. Maybe
Yeah,
taking a little
potentially.
bit of rest.
That's on the 19th, right?
Yeah, that Wednesday.
Yep. I think too it could be like kind of like a spiritual awareness or like some kind of like deeper awareness of the meaning behind things or like it would be like sometimes like I feel like we can be so hard on ourselves about certain things and it's not until we get like a shift in like perspective sometimes that we're able to be like, oh, like I can cut myself a break for like 5 seconds. Like I'm not doing as bad as I thought I was. I feel like the sun meeting Neptune here might be like offering of ourselves some grace on like how we've been doing and where we've been going because we all just are kind of like really trying our best and that's all we can really do, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a good point because we're coming off of the Virgo eclipse, which can be a really highly like
Critical.
critical. Yeah, highly
Mhm.
critical, or like, it being the full moon eclipse in Virgo, like how can you release some of the things that you thought you had control over that you're so, uptight about or so frustrated about because you don't own it? And this may be that big moment where it's like, you're right, I can't control this. I can't own this. I can't like force this to fit, right? And it just dissolves then.
Yeah, I mean it kind of does like open up to the larger discussion of that like axis between Virgo and Pisces, like what are the criticisms that we are letting go and releasing and the like perfectionist tendencies and like having to have all the answers and having to have everything mapped out and how can we like lean more into like trust and compassion and you know um just like a greater awareness in some way.
Yeah, there is just much more spiritual component than I think the Virgo eclipse was just like, oh, this is all practical and it's all terrible and it's all a mess. And then the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual component is like, oh, it's all a mess for this reason. Or,
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, I think like Virgos really are like the Virgo archetype is really like the problem solver and like the healer. And
yeah,
the only way that you can heal issues is by seeing what's wrong and
right.
like cleaning that up. So it's like, Virgos are just Virgos.
Exactly. And so, I mean, it's just a bit of like, if that was a lot of that happening, and Mercury is retrograde now, and so the review is very intense. This can maybe be a bit of the week where you like just kind of let it go and you just let it release and you let it dissolve and accept it. And I mean, just don't go overboard, don't engage with too many drugs or alcohol. And
Right. But we are experiencing like a big release in that like mercurial led area. Like
yeah, we are.
there's a big like review and release of the past. Um, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's also something to note.
I know.
Hmm.
Interesting that's the Virgo eclipse is happening in Trump's second house.
Mm. You can relate, perhaps.
I don't know I mean, the stocks have been just like crashing, so
Yeah, I think they are gonna keep on doing that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really like a stock person, but I know like I do keep up with social media and everybody's like, we're gearing up for a recession. So,
oh yeah.
yeah.
It made me kind of downfall that we're recording this like right before the eclipse, though. We don't have any eclipse news to report on you yet, but I think that's been the huge talk anyway, of
Right,
just
right.
like resources and control of those resources has been really like nobody really knows what's going to happen. Nobody can predict what's going to happen. And that's very Virgo. And you don't have the information, you know?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Interesting. I'm kind of seeing him through a whole new lens now that I know that Virgo's in his second.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a friend actually growing up who I was very jealous of because they had Virgo in their second, and she was also like really, she was always like really fine detailed about her finances and like knew what was going on. And I never knew what was going on in like the financial realm. And I was like, ow, I don't get it. Like she literally one time sat me down and was like, you need to make an Excel spreadsheet for your finances and you need to put in everything. And I was like, huh? Like, and looking back, I'm like, it fits so well for that,
Yeah.
like Virgo in the second.
Yeah, and it may just be now like having to release all of that. Wherever Virgo is in your chart, you've been going through maybe a bit of identity crisis in that space of like what do you actually control in that area now?
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think it is like things will definitely come up and help you to realize like how much control do you have and how much do you not. And it's oftentimes that I was thinking about control a lot the other day actually,
Mm.
but control is kind of like a
It's an
perception.
illusion.
Yeah, it's like a perception of something that's true, but it's not because we actually don't have that much
Any
control.
control.
Yeah.
No. Very
So
little at least. Like what we actually can control is so minuscule. And then when you even zoom out and look at the whole world or even just the whole country or the whole town that you're in, like you really don't have anything.
exactly. So,
There's
well,
Pisces. That's the Pisces
there,
Virgo
yeah.
explanation.
And there, Pisces takes a bow. Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are all things to be thinking about. At this time in the middle of this week. And then on the 20th, the Thursday, we have the sun entering into Aries and it's our spring equinox.
Yes, we do.
Finally.
I
And now
know.
this,
Go
yeah, it's
ahead.
our rebirth
It is. It is. I mean, we do still have like, um,
review.
yeah, we still have Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde. But we're dancing there. We're starting to like get our groove back and feel it.
Yeah, the sun is exalted in Aries, so there is a much more feeling of empowerment. Like I think that's a very like solar thing of like feeling more empowered to be a leader, to take an action. Your ego is now more alive and more clear in terms of like what you want to do. And maybe now that the sun's in the same sign as the Mercury and Venus, it's more of a review portion, but you're like, oh, I understand exactly why this has to be redone, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think we will definitely have some understanding there. I think anytime though we have all these planets in Aries too, it's like important to pay attention to like overheating and like warmth in some way. And overheating can also like manifest as like frustration and anger and like
Mm,
combativeness. So, like I think that's important. We might be like reviewing like, Mercury would be like our mental sphere. We would be reviewing like what irritates us, like what gets on our nerves, like in our head, and
yeah.
also when like the sun's moving in, like I think also like the physical conditions around you get warmer too.
Right. Well, all that warmth is to like gear you up to fight, you know?
Right,
So
right.
like it's like what are you fighting for now? Like what is so important, hot, and heavy that you have to like really fight for this and really embrace this now, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
But I feel like we might not be ready to speak on that or might be a bit like hesitant until Mercury goes direct.
Well,
It's
we're
like
definitely not going to be ready to do anything with Mars and Cancer either.
yeah, that's very true too. Very true. It's like we're like, yeah, we're empowered, but do we do anything about it? Not yet. Do we speak about it? Not yet.
I mean, it can definitely be a lot of heightened. Yeah, I mean, we are really being ruled by a Mars in Cancer now. Like, it's Mars in Cancer is doing a lot, so it can definitely be a lot of heightened agitations. But then, like, unclear action still, unclear work, unclear planning with Mercury retrograde. Like, just everything is still a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
you really want to fix it, and you really want to fight for it.
You're thinking about it. You're really thinking about it. That's for sure.
So.
You'll get there. Yeah. We
You'll
all
get
will.
there, but yeah, you do have to like kind of look at what you're really feeling. I think what you're really feeling geared up to do is that is something that's going to carry forward into April, like when these planets do eventually go to direct. And like this is a long-term fight, but Mars doesn't really like Mars is quick. Mars likes fast things. So
Yeah. Let's say like April is for action, but let's see, actually not actually until April. I'll give you exact April 18th is for action when Mars moves into Leo.
yeah, I mean you're definitely gonna be fired up then, but then I think the sun's in Taurus around that
Right, so it's
time.
then like you've actually cooled down as soon as
You
you've
cool
gotten
down.
ready.
You like took all this indirect action, and
Right. Oh my goodness.
that's why the spring is such a mess because we just like we don't really get anything that's nice and easy. You're just fighting all these battles that are like continuous.
Yeah, meanwhile, there's like energy flying everywhere with the eclipses.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll get through it. But I mean, at least I think, people will enjoy some of the fire energy and some of the warmth to it. But I think just being aware that all that passion, you have to leave room, like, and be careful if it burns too hot. If you are burning away or cutting bridges, like, just be mindful of that because you may regret it later. You may just realize that you want to have done it differently.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very important point to make. Definitely look where like Aries is in your chart and how like just to bring like that extra layer of awareness. Like, okay, I'm gonna feel like a little heated or like there's gonna be like some extra attention on like this area of my life. Maddie, Aries is in her ninth, and then for me, Aries is in my 12th. So yeah, just some extra focus there.
Yeah, I know. I've been definitely geared up about my future and astrology and things, but I don't have a clear plan of action for any of those things.
Right. I don't think I've been like geared up about 12th house things. Maybe.
That's a hard thing to get geared up about,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Let me think. I think it's just like self-reflection, just like constantly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
constantly self evaluating your life and everything that's come up to this point. In a way, the 12th house is like your end of the cycle in some way.
Right. I think that like the Aries in the 12th is also being like a leader in the 12th in some way, like for other people going through like darker moments or
Mhm.
darker like stuff, it's like being like helpful in that area or
Yeah.
like a guiding force in some kind of way.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual guider, like, it is like the 12th house is the like asylums and like prisons and like people who are on the outskirts of society,
Right.
and
Right,
you've been
yeah.
working in that area. So,
Yes, I have noticed like hospitals and things like that, like definitely
yeah.
popping up.
Yeah. So, definitely that more of that and that so like that's kind of what continues for the rest of this week is then that happens on Thursday. Friday, Venus will sextile Pluto, so she's retrograde in Aries and she'll come back to a sextile Pluto. And like Pluto here in Aquarius making this sextile to Aries does seem to intensify the need for power. But
Mm-hmm.
now, maybe with the Venus retrograde, you're reviewing some of your relationships with power in relationships, or just kind of revisiting those sources of power within yourself, like what things, passions and such bring you that power or that strength, and maybe a review of that again and more awareness of that with the sun here.
Yeah, I think with the sextile too, I think it'll be like kind of like an undertone or like something that like goes on in the background. Like since it's like a little bit softer, like it might not be like slam in your face, but it'll be like one of those things that you take notice of.
Yeah, exactly. It is softer energy, but it kind of just builds to the whole theme of like, oh, I have to do this. Like I have to address this, or I have to
Mm-hmm.
fight for this again, you
Right,
know?
right. Yeah, for sure.
And then just from the next day too, though, then we end the week on Saturday. The Sun in Aries will meet conjunct Venus. And this is where Venus dies, in the sky. I mean, you haven't been able to see her probably for the past week or so, but if you notice, like Venus is the brightest star in the sky. Like she always
Mm-hmm.
is. Like she's the brightest star. She's so bright. But when she gets within 10 degrees of the sun, she's suddenly blinded by the sun's rays and you can't see her in the sky. And then when they conjunct, like she is like combust the sun, and now you really can't see her. So now the brightest star in the sky is gone. It's so
Right.
like ancient astrology, like that was a significant thing because the thing you look to, the thing that was the brightest light is like hidden. And so it's sort of this moment of like death and also rebirth, though Venus will be reborn on the other side of the sun. But this is this peak moment of like what you're reviewing. What are you letting go of? Like, what did you do life before that you're letting go of? Or what relationships are you letting go of? Or like, what desires are you removing or clearing away? Or what do you just have more awareness about what is important to you, you know?
Mm-hmm. Does the so Venus still continues to move backwards into Pisces.
Yeah.
Interesting though. It definitely is like yeah, like a releasing of like those Venusian themes. I remember reading about in the Hellenistic text too, like anytime the sun is even within like this is of course for natal charts, but even within like 15 degrees of a planet, like it really kind of like outshines it and like diminishes its effect in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I couldn't remember if it was 10 or 15, but that's when it's like considered I think it's combust the sun, and like the sun is just too close to the sun so you can't see it in the sky, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's like I think it's so if it's within like 15 degrees, it's considered like under the beams.
Yeah, under the beams, that's the term. And it's
Yeah.
combustion too is the other one. But then when it hits that exact conjunction point, when it's within a degree of conjunction with the sun, it's called being in its chariot. And so it's kind of protected on a way. It's almost like you think about it like the eye of the hurricane storm, where
Yeah.
you're in
Hmm.
the middle of the hurricane, but it's actually peace and quiet because it's just this big moment of like the planets are merging together. They're just connected now. They're so close that they're sharing all the information. And there's this big moment of clarity sometimes in that space.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So we got a lot happening with like Venus in general, like we got a lot going on with her. So if you're like a Venus ruled person or like Venus is prominent in your chart in some way, like we really got a lot of transformations happening for you personally as an individual since like Venus is really shifting and changing so much. And yeah, I'm interested how that will kind of manifest on that day. A lot of awareness around like that what Venus retrograde is, I think. Is
Well,
it
I
also
think it's significant. Wait,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just
Is
saying, I
it
think
all
it's significant that, like, even though Venus is retrograde in both Aries and Pisces, that we're having the Sun conjunction in Aries.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Is it also called a Kazemi when
Cazimi, yeah, it's when they're exactly conjunct. Is called a Cazimi, but it's also called like they're in their chariot. It's like a other term for it.
yeah, because I think I've heard Chris Brennan use the word Kazemi numerous times.
Yeah, Cazimi is when they're exactly conjunct. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's while this is a split retrograde though, like I just think it's interesting that this Cazimi, this part is happening right in Aries, and like that means there's a little bit more, I feel like, leaning on this Aries energy than there is perhaps in Pisces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. More of like striking out as individuals, doing your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Claiming your power and leadership and things of that nature. Yes, for sure. So,
I don't know if we talked about it before, like on the podcast, but we had talked about it like personally about how like Venus retrogrades can oftentimes be like women's rights issues.
Yeah.
Um, so it'd be interesting actually on this day to see if anything in particular comes up about like women's rights in general. I know there's been like a lot going on about trans rights, and I'm not sure if like Venus would represent that or not, but yeah,
I think so in
interesting.
some way. I think so
Hmm.
in some way. There hasn't been a ton of that, but I do think so in some way because it's kind of like the individual, their ownership of their identity, right? Like Aries is
Hmm.
very much your identity. So yeah, I think it could be a big point of awareness around that and what is being challenged there with Mars and Cancer cut away from.
Yeah,
Um,
it'll definitely be interesting to like keep an eye out in the future, like on this date in particular, to see if, we have any like notable manifestation of something related to like gender identity and things of that nature.
right, for sure. So yeah, that's all I have for this week today.
Yep.
So welcome Aries season, though we made it. So just go kind of slow at first.
Yeah, well, not like you'll have a choice, but
Yeah.
when Aries season is almost over, you'll feel like, whoa, for like 2 days.
Yeah, you'll feel great. And then you'll be in Taurus season. You'll have to go slow again anyway. So that's great. That's fun. But Mars will be in Leo, so
Right.
oh
Well, hopefully you'll like it at that point. Hopefully you'll be like, well, now I'm kind of used to going slow anyways, and now I'm gonna enjoy it.
exactly. Great. Well, if you want more content from us, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Two Girls Talk Transits, and we will see y'all next week.
See you. Have a good week.